joining us on this episode. We all have a born date and we all have an expiration date. What matters is the dash in between. So, no matter how hard or how amazing, always remember it's a woman's world. So, tonight's guest was actually kind of connected with me from another friend. Her name is Tammy Ebright. And my friend recommended, she said, Heather, you've got to talk to her. Her story is amazing. She'd be great for your podcast. So I reached out. And so, Tammy, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you. So let's just jump in. I always want to just jump in on the stories because there's so many amazing stories, so many amazing women that I've been blessed to be able to have on this podcast and also my other podcast that I did before this. A lot of my listeners have kind of come with us. So let's just jump in on your story because I feel like you have a lot to share with us from your story and into what your current life is. Let's go back 12 years. We'll just start there, and I'll let you just take it away.
Okay. 12 years ago, my husband, David, suddenly passed away. We had been at the lake that weekend and it was a Sunday before Thanksgiving, and we had, as we were leaving the lake, we had this blowout on our car, and it ended up spending the night at my dad's in Sedalia. And the next morning, David got up and kind of did some things, got ready. It's a Monday morning. I had work to do, and our kids had school, or our son had school. And so he packed us all up, pouring down rain. We head home, and all day it was just a weird feeling. It's just like this, like you intuitively, that there's something wrong in the energy world or something, I just felt really strange all day long. And we talked about, so he came home, he did his laundry, he turned around and he went back to my dad's house in Sedalia so he could do some hunting, take care of the trailer tire. And we talked about 4:00 when I was picking our son up from school and our daughter from daycare, and didn't think much of it. Again, all day I'm feeling this kind of heaviness, but about 10:00 I looked at the time and I was like, oh, we didn't talk tonight. Well, I'm not going to call him right now because he might be already asleep. He was going to get up early and hunt. And about 10:30, I got a call from my bonus mom telling me that he was not breathing. And I was like, oh, okay. And when this call comes in, like, you don't really think, your life has just changed. But I was like, okay, well, I'm going to get ready. I'm going to head that way. I got to find somebody to come stay with the kids. And so went through all that. She's like, don't drive alone. Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So, I called a girlfriend. I called his parents. And before anybody could even get there, she calls me back and she says, he's gone now. And I was like, what? He's gone. I'm like, well, keep trying. Keep trying. And she's like, Tammy, we can't. It's been too long. He hasn't been breathing for too long. And they live kind of out in the country, so I'm sure that it took a long time for the ambulance to get there. And I always just think about like how horrible for them to experience that. And in a lot of ways, a blessing that I wasn't the one that was experiencing that and going through that with him. And so our kids back then were 4 and 10, and they're now, our daughter is 17. Whew. And our son is 22, and it's been quite a journey. Back then, I had a successful mortgage career, and throughout these years of secondary losses, you think about the major loss that happens, but a lot is not talked about is the other losses that you experience afterwards. Sometimes you lose friends. People get divorced and you think, okay, yeah, they lose friends. That makes a lot of sense. But you lose your spouse and you lose friends. You're like, wow, that's really weird. You wouldn't think it would be that way. But people can be really uncomfortable with grief and really not know what to say or do. And it sometimes the easiest way is just to kind of disengage.
Yeah, I think that my mom went through that when my brother was killed his senior year, and
Mm,
everyone was there, and when it happened, and the funeral, and then she said people just kind of started, like my friends just kind of disappeared. I don't know what happened, and I think that another lady that she knew that had also lost her son, she said, well, sometimes people don't know what to say, so they go away.
yeah,
They
they
don't know
just,
how to console you. They don't know what they're supposed to say. They don't know how to help you. So they just think, oh, well, I'll just disappear and then I don't have to worry about it.
yeah. And I think that's one of the hardest things about it. I mean, one, the first loss is obviously very, very painful. But then when you start losing your community, it's very alienating. So
Right.
I'm sorry that your mom experienced that too. Um, it's very common. And I would just say that people that when a friend loses somebody, it's not contagious. And be that person that can be there for them. And I like to tell people to actually put it on your calendar to remind you to reach out, because your life is going to keep going and you're
Right.
going to have all these challenges too. And so being very intentional around people, your friends, your loved ones that have lost somebody, to make sure that you are regularly checking in. It
Yeah.
almost, the way that you do that is to make it as a calendar um, appointment. And it's an appointment to make sure that you are, still building community with those people.
Yeah. So then what was the next step? What happened after that? Like how did you um now you're feeling like you're losing friends. You've obviously had the loss of him. Like as and I'm kind of referring back to thinking of things like with my mom going through that. How did you get up every day and just keep pushing, to keep your life going?
Well, I actually ended up joining an organization that was a widow organization. And that gave me a community.
Hmm.
It gave me as new widows came in, I could reflect and see, okay, I am getting better. I'm not quite there anymore. So I could see that I was growing and that I was feeling successful, because I think that a lot of times as women, we judge ourselves so harshly that we're not where we should be at
Right.
times. And I think that really helped a lot with the healing. And then I started uh, I enrolled in a coaching program, or coaching training program. I had been in sales for 20 years and had never had any professional training. So I started doing Sandler sales training, which taught me a lot about like DISC and driving forces, which is our behaviors and motivators, which is a lot of what I do today. But I went there because I was looking for, I knew I needed support and I needed something to give me more consistency with life. And that's where I began, was with that program.
Awesome. So before we get into what you're doing now, let's go back a little bit. Like, I was having last Monday was the anniversary of my brother's death, and it's been 24 years. But I was having a conversation with a friend, and I was talking about how grief is so weird because for 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, 9 years, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm good. It's just another day. Yeah, we're talking about him and we're celebrating his life, and then something happens, and then all of a sudden, a song is on, and it just knocks the wind out of you, and you're right back to that point, and then you can be okay for a couple years, and then like this past year, I realized my mom's now gone, my sister's now gone. I realized there's nobody to talk about him with. Nobody that knows him is still here. And I don't know why, but it just literally knocked the wind out of me because I'm like, oh my gosh, is his legacy, like, is this it? Is this where it stops? Is this, and we were talking about how weird grief is because literally, like, you can be fine and then all of a sudden you're not. And it doesn't matter how many years it's been. It seems to just, some years are just harder than others. And do you find that for you too? Like some years you're like, okay, well, it is what it is, and I'm fine, and it's good, and we're just going to keep on moving. And then you're like,
Mm, yes. I think that well, society all thinks that, after the first year, it should be, you're good.
yep,
Come on, get over it, get back to life. Where are you? Like, where's the old Tammy at? But
yeah,
really, grief is more like this, like crazy little circles where you don't ever know what is going to trigger that. Or, for me, I think some of the hardest times were, when the kids would struggle and I didn't have that. I didn't have him to support me in that.
right. That would be hard. Yeah.
So I think that's the misconception. And especially in the beginning, that first year, you think, okay, next year is going to be better. And then the second year was actually probably harder than the first because you're not in shock anymore. You're just trying to figure out what your new
Yeah.
normal is. And I can remember when the kids were little, my daughter has always been very verbal about her grief, and we did some little videos, and she was talking about how hard it is on her because mommy has to work all the time and daddy's not there to babysit us, as she would say, so they had to be with other people. And so when your children are grieving and you're grieving, it's hard to it's really hard to focus on your own grief. So I think that it took a long time before I actually addressed my own grief, because it just got, you just have to go put one step in front of the other and just keep going. And
Mhm.
while behind the scenes, a lot of the time I felt like I was just losing it.
Yeah. And I think for me, when my mom passed away, my youngest was 4, and my mom had been watching her um, during the time where she was healthy enough to. My mom passed of cancer, so
Mm.
um, and she didn't have any hair. My daughter, when she would drop her off at pre-K, she would kiss her head and say, "I hope your hair grows while I'm gone." And we would tell her these stories because, of course, at 4 she doesn't really remember, a lot of actual memories of my mom. And then my older daughter was in 3rd grade, I think, or 4th grade, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever you are, 9. And so she remembered my mom. So she would help us tell stories. But I can remember feeling like every morning I would get up and put a mask on to hide
Mm.
my own grief so that I could go be strong for the girls and let them grieve, or ask questions or whatever. And then it was like, okay, at what point can I take the mask off and just grieve myself? And I remember one night I was the girl's dad was keeping them occupied. I'm just going to go take a long bath, and I'm going to. And as I started to relax, a cup of Barbies fell over in the bathtub, and the water in it was cold, and it just cold water straight on me, and I was just like, and I'm just like, I can't even grieve by like I can't even have this moment, and just really felt sorry for myself. And then again, okay, mommy, yeah, I'm coming, and just right back at it. And so I can only
Mhm.
imagine with it being your husband in the same household, that would be even more so, where you just couldn't really, you were just always having to put the mask on for them.
Yeah, it was challenging for a lot of years because I was still in a career that really took a lot of mental, toll, really. And trying to be at all the things, and still, back then I was chairing, a charity auction, and, I was spread so thin, but I was still trying to do all of the things that I had done before he passed. And then I finally, realized that I just couldn't. I needed to kind of reprioritize. And that happened in around 2018, because my daughter actually ended up kind of sick. She has some chronic health challenges. And I realized that the toll of her, the stress of her being with strangers sometimes, or, my son watching her, which was also a stress on him. All of those things were taking me away. My job was taking me away from that. And the kids, they don't understand that you have to go and make money and keep up the lifestyle that we had before their dad died. So, I started back then. I actually founded my company, Unleash Your Amazing, on Valentine's in 2018. So just before that, but it originally was to be a part of my mortgage business plan, to where I was going to do monthly events or quarterly events, to where I did some trainings for the agents to help them grow their business. And so that's kind of was the initial vision. And as time went through and more like life challenges would happen, and, I slowly kind of backed away from mortgages and leaned more into helping people. By that time, we had had the widow organization, the local chapter, for, several years, where, I am actively coaching people that were experiencing grief. And not that that's a big part of what I do now, but it was the evolution of, learning to hold space for other people, and just be there. Yeah.
Do you think that, I'm trying to think how I want to phrase this. What would be, if we have somebody, because I know that there's people that listen that, and one person is in my mind in particular, but recently became a widow.
Mm-hmm.
What would you tell that person? Like, for someone, or even, I think, somebody said the other day that getting divorced, and again, I have not lost a spouse. I've lost everything else people wise, and the comment was made that divorce is harder on people emotionally than becoming a widow, because the divorced person's still lurking.
Mm-hmm.
This person's going through a divorce, and the ex is really making life difficult for her.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought was, can you really even speak on that, because you haven't lost a spouse? I
I would.
used to say when my brother passed, it would be easier if you knew, because then you could say all those things. Well, then with my mom, I knew, and you say all those things, and then you just wait. And so I'm like, it's not easier. I don't think there's an easy
There's no
loss.
button, no matter what the
Right.
state is. There's no easy.
Right. So what would you say for someone who's recently widowed and just feels like, I just can't. I just can't do it.
You will find this strength inside you. Find a community, find another widow, somebody that has been there before. I think that we get really caught up in society on comparing losses. Like, oh, this loss is worse than this loss is worse. Like, oh, we're taught that even as kids. Oh, somebody always has it worse than you.
Right.
That is so minimizing and invalidating. Like, we need to remove that from our vocabulary. Whatever your biggest loss is in your life, that is the most traumatic thing for you. And my biggest loss is the most traumatic for me. There's no comparison.
No, because no matter what it is, you lose a piece of you.
You do.
You said something in the beginning about the old Tammy. I don't think we're ever going to be the old whoever, because you lose a piece with each person you lose. They take a piece with them. And so I'm different than I was before my brother. And I also lost a cousin when I was 15. He was 16. That was my first loss. He was like a brother. Each person takes a piece of you with them. So I don't think we're ever going to be the same as we were before.
No.
But
People want us to be the same. Like they're uncomfortable with the change that comes with us. And I mean, the only thing, the only constant in life is change, you know? And I know that's an oxymoron, but it is so true. That is the only constant. And if you are not changing when that change comes up, then you're going to be stuck.
hmm you have to evolve. Everything, we're evolving daily. And I always try to, I always talk about turning my pain into purpose, or turning my
Mhm.
pain into power, or whatever phrase I pick, depending on what I'm speaking on. And that's really the way I look at it, is like, you and I were talking before I started recording. I was, becoming a speaker, and I'm like, I don't have a story. Like, I don't have that one, these people are talking about being in prison, or, overcoming drugs, and I'm like, I don't have a big story. And somebody looked me right in my eyes and said, Heather, your whole life has been a story.
Mhm.
And that completely changed when I would go to write a speech, because I kept thinking, well, okay, what's my big thing? What was the Big Bang Theory in my life? What happened to just, well, there's 50,000 things in 52 years. Something has been constantly becoming my story. And so loss has been a huge part of my story.
Mhm.
And so I try to always, what can I do to give back with that knowledge that,
Mhm.
I've overcome it. So there's that. And, some people want to overcome it and some people don't. And we have to, respect both. Some
Yeah.
people don't know. I don't know if they don't want to, they don't know how. They don't
Mm,
know how.
I would say it's more like they don't know how. They feel stuck, you know. I mean, they get invalidated because they still have pain. And when we're invalidating somebody's pain, they're just stuffing it down inside them versus, allowing them to share their grief and process it. We're so quick to be like, "Are you still talking about that? Oh my God, that's like so yesterday," you know?
Well,
And
it's been 24 years. Why are you still upset?
yes, but
Because I am.
my husband's sister is also, still grieves the loss of her brother. It's okay to have grief because it's a sign of love. And sometimes I think that sometimes we even need that to come up so we can cry when we've been trying to be strong for so long, and stuff it down, keep going, just
Mhm.
keep going, keep swimming. But
Yep.
occasionally I like have to put on like some sad movie and listen to some sad songs so I can make myself
Release it.
cry.
Mhm. Yep. I have done that. I have done that so many times where I'm like, okay, I can tell I am just about
Mm,
right here and I'm gonna blow at any moment. And so it's like, okay, hot bath time. And then I'll just sit in there and like literally either play the song we played at my mom's funeral, or the
mm.
something about my brother, and just make myself start crying. And then it just kind of keeps going. And then I'm like, okay, I feel like I can start over now. You've got to find a way to release all of that.
You do. Your body needs that release.
And some people have, I'm not going to call her out, but someone in my family, she thinks crying is a sign of weakness.
Mm,
Like, oh Lord, then I'm weak, because there are days where I just need a good cry, and I know I just need a good cry, and so I will think about whatever to make myself cry, and then I'm good to go for a while. But um, I think in my experience, I can go to the funeral of someone I don't even know, but I know what that family's feeling, and I can instantly just be like, you know, so empathetic and just, tears just rolling down my face, because I know, even if I don't know that person, I
mm.
know what that family is going through. I know the pain. I know all the thoughts that are going through their head, and it puts you right back to that situation.
It does, yes. When I hear of somebody that I know that's lost a spouse, especially. I mean, lost anyone, it's still, but there's this additional grief that I feel when somebody that I know has joined the club nobody wants to join. Uh,
Mm.
and I'm sure that you feel the same. Like the losses that you've experienced are the ones that affect you the most when you hear other people experiencing them.
Yeah. Especially for me, it's when somebody, a younger person, my oldest daughter's boyfriend's brother just passed this year. And, just so young. And
Mm,
it took me right back to where, um, all of the friends of, my brother, it's not long enough. And, that's what people always say, you're just weird about your birthday. Because I celebrate I throw myself a party every year. And I said, because people in my family haven't, my mom died at 58. My brother was 18. My cousin was 15. Like, I know too many people who didn't get very many birthdays. So I'm going to celebrate everyone that I'm here. And if that means I throw myself a party every year, I throw myself a party every year. But I'm happy to be here every year that I get because so many people don't.
yeah. It's a blessing. And I think that when we're here left to pick up the pieces after somebody that we love
Mm.
passes, uh, it's almost required that we step into the most authentic and powerful person that we can be. One, because we're going to have to go through a lot of challenges alone, or yeah, mostly alone. But two, because then that becomes a part of their legacy is when that catalyst, that thing that happens changes us, then we become somebody new in that process of rediscovering, like, who am I now after this event has happened? And then, we grow a little bit and then something else happens that we have to come to terms with, or grow through, and then we become somebody a little bit different than that. We're a little bit stronger, we're a little more empathetic,
Yep.
a little more kind. And I think that that's the evolution of change, is little by little losses, experiences, challenges, they're molding us into the higher purpose that we're here on earth to fulfill. If he hadn't have died, I would probably still be doing mortgage loans. We life would have looked very different, but that wasn't the story. And I think that part of that is because the kids and I, we're to take that loss and let it transform us into, better humans, evolve into somebody that is able to create change for others, and help them feel safe in their stories.
Hmm. Hmm. That's good. Yeah. So let's talk about the kids for a minute. Your daughter, you said, was how old?
She was 4 and she's 17 now.
So does she remember her dad, or does she remember stories that she's heard of her dad?
She remembers fun things with her dad. She remembers,
That's good.
riding the four-wheeler with him, and little bits of memories of him.
That's
Hmm.
good. That's good. I think that does help because I know with my girls, my youngest will say, I know you say I did these things, but I don't really remember. And I feel like part of that is, the situation was traumatizing, I'm sure, and she didn't have the emotions to be able to, or the whereabouts to even know what emotions she was dealing with it for. I was gone for 36 days straight, taking care of my mom while her dad and her sister took care of her. So that was probably very confusing for her as well. Um, how have your kids? what have been their biggest struggles and how did you guys overcome that over the years?
I don't know if I want to talk on a podcast about the kids and their specific struggles now that they're a little bit older. If they were still little,
Right.
but I don't think that that's probably just appropriate. There's been a lot, but I
Okay.
would say that the main thing, which is public, would be just my daughter's chronic health challenges that she's experienced, and not having all the answers to be able to have both parents genetically tested. Those are some that
Mm,
are
gotcha.
more challenging too. But yeah, they've both had their share of challenges. But it's something that as they got older, I used to share very openly on Facebook, but as they got older, it became less appropriate to be putting their lives out there.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah, we have a friend of mine, her daughter, which is kind of where my thought was, is the daddy daughter dance.
Mm.
Was like I don't have a dad, and so I'm gonna get emotional thinking about it. But she said a man from their church stepped up and said, "I know I'm not your dad, but can I stand in for him?" And she was just tears rolling. Yes, you can. Because her biggest thing, I think she's in second grade,
Mm-hmm.
third grade. Her biggest thing was just feeling different. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I feel different. I don't have, and of course her mom was like, there's a lot of, other girls, they're, that's her uncle and that, she was trying to make her. And so she said, I do, I feel better. And having this guy step in made her feel a little better. But I was just thinking of the things where, those type of things where there's a title, you know, to the event or whatever. And how difficult that would probably be for a little girl. But my kids are, yours might be too, but my kids, we didn't really do daddy daughter dances back then. They're too old. But, just things like that, I'm sure have just
Mm-hmm.
been, difficult and all the way around. But so let's talk more about where you are now, because I know you made some changes in what um, what your we'll call it career, what your career is, and
Mm.
turned it more into a calling. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So as I said before, I kind of leaned more into coaching, um, training, doing those things, and leaned out of the mortgage career. Um, I had a whole bunch of like additional challenges that happened in 2018, 2019, and job loss. They've closed one of the mortgage branch I was working at, and just some difficult relationships. And um, I was praying and asking for guidance one day, and I had a coach introduce me to a science called human design a few years earlier, and I had been like very dismissive, like, oh, I don't really believe in all that. It has astrology as part of it. So human design is astrology, the Kabbalah, the I Ching, the chakra system, and then quantum physics to pull it all together to create essentially an energetic blueprint that helps us to make better decisions, helps us understand where we're maybe conflicting with other people. And so when I was like praying that day, I went over and I pulled out my coaching book and my report fell out. And I was like, okay, I'll go down the rabbit hole. And that was August of 2019. And this completely changed my relationships, changed, with my parents, with my kids. I learned that both of my kids are what's called emotionally defined, or defined in the emotional intelligence piece in their chart, and I'm undefined. And so, if you anywhere in the human design chart where somebody else is defined and you're undefined, then you're amplifying or you're distorting that energy. And so they're emotional beings. My children are emotional beings. I'm not an emotional being by nature, But add alcohol, very emotional. Add, feeling other people's emotions. I would amplify again or distort that. Once I learned that, I feel like it was safer. I'm gonna have to quit talking with my hands off the things. It was a safer environment for my children to share their emotions. I didn't grow up in an emotional area where people talked about emotions. So I think that that's something that I grew into once I learned that I was feeling emotions from other people. So I think that that's one of the things that really was the biggest aha. And so I added that in, and I had already gotten certified in the DISC and driving forces. I'm certified in emotional intelligence, acumen. But the human design it's been this piece. It's probably the science that has changed my life the most and changed how I parent, how I friend, all the things. It just made me more energetically smart, energetically knowing, to where I quit taking things as personal as I did before. I realized that a lot of times we think it's this way or that way. And I think that human design teaches that it could be this way and that way. It doesn't have to be this or that. It can be both. And people's feelings, their thoughts, learning to better understand them and hold space for differences. So I have been in the business school for it now, and I'm 35, getting ready, 36 weeks in of a 50-week program where I'll become certified, and I'll be able to use the tool inside the business setting to create like power teams of people that energetically are, bring different strengths to the table, and energetically it creates more cohesive groups, partnerships that come together, like looking at two people's charts and seeing, okay, oh, you feel like your partner says, wants you to prove yourself to them all the time. Let me look at the science behind it. Let me look at that. And somebody that has what's called a defined willpower, they energetically, somebody that's undefined may feel like they have to prove their worth to that person, even if that person is not saying, hey, you need to do more. It's an energetic thing that's happening. It's something that the person that's undefined is here to become wise. Anywhere that we're white in our chart, we're here to become wise about that energy. And it's somewhere that we've had a lot of conflict. So when I that biggest challenge, when I found the tool, I was feeling like I wasn't enough, like I had to prove my worth and all these things. And I get this book, which this is what the manual looks like. And I flip open the pages, and I come to this page that says integration circuitry. And I'm like, that looks like my chart. And And so I go on to read, and it says integration circuitry stands alone, and it empowers individuality, it empowers the collective, and it empowers the tribe just by being itself. And I was like, what? And so I started pulling people's charts and looking at it, because I was like, this can't be true. Because I was so disempowered. But I'm here to empower other people.
Right.
That didn't make any sense. So all the people around me, do you know what time you were born? Like, can I pull your chart? And I would look at it, and I would talk to them about what I had learned early on before I'd had any schooling, just by reading it, because when I obsess. And I started hearing people say, yeah, like that totally explains me. I totally relate to that. I'm like, okay. And so the more I did it, the more I felt like, okay, well, this could be true for me too, you know? And now I use it as a tool all the time with my clients in my coaching practice to help them, to empower them to see things in a more objective way.
That sounds so interesting, and it sounds like it would be very, very helpful. I'm thinking about just my little, my two girls. I'm amazed at how different they are.
Mm-hmm.
And then with their dad and I, we all have big feelings, but two of us handle them the one particular way, and two of the opposite way. And I'm thinking how helpful that would have been to be to be able to know how to, you I think as a parent sometimes it's like, okay, well this worked with the first one, so I'm going to repeat it. And then at some point you realize, okay, that worked with the first one, but this child's completely different. So now how do I, and with me, my oldest is me, so I knew exactly how to interact with her. I
Mm-hmm.
know what she's thinking before she thinks it. I know how she's going to react. Now, not so much now that she's grown because she's kind of, they develop their own personalities too. But her and I have big feelings. We know how to interact with each other. But her dad and her sister, they have big feelings. We're not always, they know how to interact with each other, but we're not really sure sometimes how to interact with that. We interact with them how we want to be interacted with, and it's not the right way.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I can see how this would be really helpful, especially in a business sense when you're building a team. This, these people are like this, so this is how you have to, that's kind of like the disc thing. You kind of know the people and their personalities of as how to interact with them.
Yes, it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference on definitely at home. And that's like if you can learn to better communicate with the people that you're around the most,
Yeah.
then you can communicate with anybody, you know.
Yeah.
Our children, our family, our parents, our relative, like they can bring out the worst side of us at times.
Mhm.
And I mean, people don't really admit that on a regular basis, but I think it's true because you just
Yeah.
have so much more time with them and they're more comfortable with you to share their big feelings, and
Mhm.
you aren't receiving their big feelings in a healthy way, then that's very disempowering for them. So like learning to better take those feelings in. And I'm very grateful, my daughter who is emotionally defined, I think that she handles emotions in a very beautiful way. She doesn't take a lot of stuff from a lot of people. She has very good boundaries, and I think that that is really good. Like I wish that I had been like that at 17.
Mm-hmm.
If
Did we even did we even know what boundaries were back then?
no,
I
not top boundaries.
I'm not familiar with that term.
I feel like she's taught me boundaries,
Yes. And I don't know that we even knew we had a right to have boundaries.
No, no, definitely not. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm glad that they're aware of those, and that mine are pretty good about boundaries as well. So
Mhm.
that's good. But
Yeah. And so there's in the human design system, there's different types. So there's essentially four types. 70% of the population are generator types, where you need to ask them yes or no questions to help them make a decision. 10% roughly are what's called a manifestor or an initiator in the business term. They have more of this closed off aura. And so this was my dad. He has this closed off aura. And that's his time. And being able to just do it, like Nike's slogan of just doing it, is
mhm.
for 10% of the population, according to this system, essentially, where they can just do it, they can initiate, where the rest of us, we're like 70%, we're here to respond to life. 19% is what's called a projector or an advisor, and they have amazing advice for other people, when it's recognized in them and they're invited to share. But how many of us, and we all have some projected traits, how many of us are always giving our well-meaning advice to other people before it's asked? So my mom, she was that type. She was a protector, advisor. And so sometimes it's very frustrating. I'm like, I didn't ask, you know?
I've had to learn with my girls being in their 20s that I try not to give advice unless I'm asked. There's a lot of times where they say something and I go, usually it's text message, and I'm like, no, just
Mm,
let it, let them just, they've got to figure out their way. And so unless they say, what should I do? Or then I'm like, okay, they said there was a question mark at the end. Let me
mm.
respond.
let
But
me, yes, let me, yes.
but I'm trying to be much better at, like, you guys are both grown now. You're 21 and 25. This is your life. You have to do things your way, and I have to, and I learned a long time ago, both of mine are the type, they're going to have to do it their way and learn. They don't, I
Mm,
can't, and I was the same way.
me,
You can't tell me, I know everything. You can't tell me nothing. And so
I wish
I
I was a better listener, but I'm just not.
Yeah, and so I'm like, okay, they're like me in that way. They're gonna have to learn it their way. So let them make their own mistakes, and just be here to pick them up if they fall. And but sometimes that's hard because as we've been older and we're wiser, we know where their path that's gonna take you here, and you don't want to go there. But if you
Mm,
tell them not to go there, they're gonna go there anyway, or mine are gonna go there anyway. So it's like, okay, as long as let me just let you go, and I'll catch you on the other side.
yeah,
But
yes.
that's what life is about, right? Those are the things that make us stronger. So,
Yeah. And sometimes even with friendships where they're venting and they're like telling us this, and it's the same story. And it's like, are you
yeah.
asking my advice or are you venting? And so then you can kind of pull the invitation out of them to share. And if they're like, no, I'm just venting, then you're like, okay, now do I have the space to hear the same vent if they're
Yeah.
not open to receiving it? So then that becomes my boundary, right? Okay, well, I appreciate that you're going through this. I gotta go or something.
Mhm.
And
Yep. I
then
told my friend the
the
other day, I said, I feel like I've had 3 people just dump all week long. I need to vent. I need to vent. I need to vent. And I'm just like, I haven't found the time or the opportunity to refill,
mm,
And so
mm,
I'm like, I take on that energy. And
yes.
so I'm like, so I'm gonna just basically, my weekend is gonna be nothing but refilling my cup. And
Mm,
so I didn't really answer a couple of phone calls, and I just spent the weekend refilling my cup so that if they call today and need to vent, I can take it back in um, and be okay. But some days it's like I can't take anymore.
mm, yeah, yeah. And mm, and it's nice to be there for people.
Yeah,
But you also have to be there for yourself
right.
first, or there's nothing left to give to
Mm-hmm.
others. Your health will then take a turn because
Yeah,
there's nothing else to give.
yeah, for sure. 100%. That's where those boundaries come in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
boundaries. So, what's one thing, we're about out of time. So what's one thing you want to make sure people know? And then also, how can people find you?
So I guess the thing that I would want people to know is that each person is individual, unique, and different than you. Even twins can have the same chart, but they're going to have different friends. So they're going to have a different nurturing that's going to make them different. So understanding that people can't do the same things that you can do, and you may not be able to do all the same things that somebody else can do. So understanding yourself, learning how you operate is important,
Yep.
and holding space for people to be different than you is also important. And then people can reach me. My website is unleashyouramazing.com. And I'm all over social media, Tammy Ebright or Unleash Your Amazing. I did just start a new podcast that's on Spotify and YouTube as of right now, called Human Design Playtime with a fellow student. So if you want to learn more about kind of our stories, and we're going to be doing public figure charts and looking at that, maybe stir up a little bit of the pot. No, hopefully to help people understand that each person can have these amazing strengths that we could really benefit from, but they can also be living in their not self or their shadow qualities. And so, like, I just feel like if the world could lean more into being in their innate strengths and less in their not self, less in the shadow, more in their gifts, then it could just be a more beautiful place.
I agree. And I think that the more authentic and the more, just owning who you are and being living in that space, um, it just brings so much peace. It's exhausting trying to be someone you're not. And I
So,
did it for 40 some years.
mhm.
And I just refuse to do it anymore. But if you're a person who's trying to be, my friend calls it a chameleon, with this group of friends you're this way, and with this group of friends you're this way, and with this group of friends you're this way, and at work you're this way, it's exhausting. Find out who you really are and just be that person. And the people, people will say, well, someone so doesn't like me. Okay. Not everyone likes me, but the people that like you are your people, and the ones that don't aren't. So don't waste your energy trying to make them like you by being somebody else.
Yeah. Yeah,
That would be my little tidbit.
I would agree. I think that that's really important to be authentic. It's interesting though. A big portion of the population has what's called a undefined identity and direction. So they do have that ability to be a chameleon. They have to get grounded in who they are, but it's also one of their gifts. They just have to make sure they're with the right group of people, because if they're with the wrong group of people and being a chameleon, it's going to really not be very healthy for them in the long run.
No, because you get to the point you don't even know what you stand for.
Mm-hmm.
I always tell, you know, the people you hang out with should be people, your true people are people that your core values are the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so if your core values aren't the same as the people you're hanging out with, then they're not your people. And that's not who you really are. So chameleon onto something else. It's, I remember one time I was probably 46, 47, and I was out with friends and we're sitting at a table and they're just talking, and I just kept thinking, I don't agree with that. Somebody
Mm-hmm.
make a comment, I'm like, I don't agree with that either. I'm just thinking this to myself, and I left that night like, you didn't agree with anything anybody said. What's wrong with you? And then I'm like, I was like, why are you being so negative? And then I realized I wasn't being negative. They just don't have the same core values that I do.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I had to start questioning, are these people really my friends, or do I just keep going and hanging out with them because I don't want to tell them no, or what, then let's dive into that. And I realized I just didn't want to tell them no. I didn't even really like them that much. I just didn't want to tell them no because I didn't want them not to like me.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I'm a recovering people pleaser. But I just thought, now looking back, I'm like, how silly is that? That you don't even like people that you're spending time with. You don't agree with anything that they say, but you just keep hanging out just because you don't want them not to like you. They probably don't like you anyway because you don't agree with anything they're saying. So, then it's something happens when you get in your 40s and into your 50s where you just don't care so much anymore, and it's a great place to be. But I'd love for, especially women, to get to that point earlier.
Yeah, to own their power earlier. Quit
Yes.
playing small for other people's comfort and just be your biggest, most amazing self.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we were connected. I would love to, once you get through your class and you're just starting to build, would you call it a practice? I don't know. You're coaching, come back on and talk to us a little bit more, and maybe we can get you some some new people that you can help, because I think it would be very helpful what you're doing.
Yeah. Well, it'll just be deeper then, and I would love to come back, yes. But I'm actually able to do like it's the more in depth. It's like looking at corporations and looking at partnerships that I'm not quite there yet. But I've had all the training for the individual, looking at the individual's charts and stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's something I use daily in my coaching practice.
Well, I might have to reach out to you and figure out how to interact with people.
Well, I would love to. I'd love to take a look at your chart and see how I can help you.
Well, thank you so much. It was so nice meeting you, and thank you for being on the podcast.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.